from loveaprilkc.com. Today we're going to be talking about international travel with a toddler. Many of you don't know this, but this year I will be celebrating my 35th birthday, and it's a tradition that I started ever since I was 29 years old to take a trip to an international destination. Due to my pregnancy in 2019 and the pandemic in 2020, I was not able to travel internationally for either of those birthdays. But this year, since I am neither pregnant and the pandemic seems to be at a space where there's a lot of testing and vaccinations are being administered, I kind of feel more confident that this would be a more appropriate time to travel, especially because it's such a huge, momentous year for me. So I'm going to be going over just the who, what, when, where, how, and why, and also including the importance when traveling with the toddler, all the things that you need to know while you're on the go. I will be documenting this entire process. So this is the first video of many regarding my international travel for my 35th birthday. If you hear my dog clicking around Cooper, that's who you hear the clickety clacks, because he can't sit still. Y'all know how that is. So this video is going to cover high level what to do when considering international travel with your toddler. Now, I'm based out of the United States, so I can't speak to what other countries are doing. So if you're using this as a guide, just be mindful of that. And I will go through everything that's US based that you need to know and things that we consider before planning our international trip. So let's get into the first tip. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, why would you be traveling during a pepperoni pizza? And I completely understand. But for me, travel is such a huge part of who I am and my DNA that because the last 2 years I wasn't able to do it, I got the itch. And so because I just have to scratch it like a lot of people do, it was time. And I know a lot of people who have traveled recently within the last 2 to 3 months, if that far. So we've gotten a lot of feedback regarding safety restrictions, regulations, testing, as well as the do's and don'ts when you're going to specific countries, staying at specific resorts. So I feel really confident, along with my husband, that traveling with our 14-month-old, who will be 16-month-old at the time, will not be a huge issue, okay? The first thing when I thought about doing an international trip that I thought about was the flights. Now, what I did was I picked a couple of countries that I was interested in visiting for my birthday, and then we started looking at the flights. So this video is going to be all about the preliminary thought process when it comes to booking a flight with your toddler. So we looked at the airlines. Now, clearly the airlines, kind of say one thing and some of them do another. I think that's across the board. So when looking at the airlines, we're just looking at the written policies of what they said that they are going to do, what they ain't going to do regarding change fees, if you have to cancel. Things like that, you really want to read in the fine print and be very, very, very careful, especially with international travel. We purchased travel insurance for our flight to be extra cautious because of the pepperoni pizza that we're in. We wanted to ensure that if we had to change it or if there was a cancellation from the country, that we would be able to change our flight to another date or get our money back. So that's the very first thing that we considered when looking at the flights for the countries that we were looking at going to. The next thing that we looked at was the booking process for having Noah in our lap versus getting an individual seat for Noah. Now, if you've never traveled with an infant under the age of 2, so airlines consider children under the age of 2 infants. If you have never traveled with an infant under the age of 2, then you would know that their seat preference costs coins. Now, the additional seat for them is not as expensive as if you were doing like a regular adult seat, but that's definitely something that we had to calculate and configure into the entire cost of the international flight. Because Noah is under the age of 2, we don't have to worry about any testing that needs to be done for him. However, it's still really important to compare the prices regarding having him in the seat versus having him in our lap. That was something we definitely took into consideration, and we looked across all the major airlines in the US that was going to our destinations of choice, and that was a major determining factor in just would this be possible for us to travel internationally. The next thing that we did regarding the just ideation of the international trip is testing. Airlines, depending on the destination you are going to, will have different policies and procedures regarding testing. So that was something that my husband and I had to weigh before deciding to take an international trip. Again, we are not concerned about our son having to take a test. It's more of him and myself having to take a test. So that was another factor in determining the destination. There are some countries as of this video where you do not have to take a COVID test before you board to enter back into the US, and there are certain countries that you don't have to take a COVID test to leave the US and come into their country. So that was again another thing that we had to calculate into our calculation regarding if we were going to travel to that destination or not. Because again, even though Noah doesn't have to take a test, my husband and I have to remain negative while going to the country and returning from the country in order to re-enter the US. So that's definitely something that we had to consider, and also making sure that the places that we were going to stay at in these particular countries that we were deciding on had a really good process for testing. How many days in advance can we take the test? What type of tests do they offer? Is it something the US will recognize? So again, that's something that we also considered before even deciding that we were going to travel internationally. Also, when we looked at the resort for consideration in the different countries, one of the things that if you've never been to an all-inclusive, there's a lot of buffet, a lot of shared food, and a lot of open bar and like past drinks. So that was another thing that we were very mindful of, is making sure that we're picking destinations or the resorts that we were thinking about staying at that had a pretty buttoned up process where everyone's not sharing a bunch of food. They have really managed how they're going to do the whole process of us eating, hours of operation, how many people can be in a certain space. Social distancing is also important. So that was another thing that we considered regarding international travel, and because we've known people who have traveled internationally, they were able to definitely give us their feedback and recommendations from the countries that they've been in about what they did, which made us feel a lot more comfortable in choosing a travel destination that was outside of the US. Another thing that we had to consider is bringing a car seat and a stroller. Typically, before the pepperoni pizza started, you were able to gate check your car seat as well as your stroller. We also had to check the airlines because now they have a thing called air checking, which means that before you even go through security, you would have to check those items, which means that going through security with a toddler will be a daunting process, right? Especially if your toddler is walking and they're heavy, right? So those are things that you also would have to consider. That's what we considered, which airline had a better policy regarding stroller and as well as car seat, because we will be bringing our own car seat and we will be bringing our own stroller with us to this vacation destination. And the reason why we are doing it, even though in the country that we are thinking about going to, the private and public transportation or shared transportation option, I should say, they do have car seats for us. We just feel a lot more confident having it from us and from our country. I know a lot of people do that too when they travel internationally. They just bring what they have because they're confident in that it's going to work based on, you know, the country's regulations. So there's no shade. It's not being shady. It's just from a lot of parents that we've spoken to prior to the pepperoni pizza that would bring stroller and or car seat. That is why they would do it. We were also making sure that the pre-boarding process with this airline was either similar to before or revamped. This is my very first time traveling with a baby, as well as my husband. Even though you see people travel with kids, you don't really know what goes into traveling with kids. So since this will be our first time traveling with an infant, we really were checking the pre-boarding process now that it has changed due to the pepperoni pizza. Now keep in mind, at the time this video is filmed, a lot of airlines are not doing like the first class, all that. They're not doing that. So by the time we go on our trip, things might have changed. Things may change. I will definitely update you regarding that information. But as of now, when I'm filming this video in March of 2021, the pre-boarding process is pretty much, for the airlines that we've looked at, it's pretty much the same, where they're not doing like first class kind of like that. It's more like you're going to be boarding based on your section. If you do have small children, you will kind of board in that same manner, but you will enter the plane differently than you were if it was a regular flight. Again, that might be different, but based on what we've seen in the area in the US that we are in, that is how the flights are handling their travel based on the international destinations that we've looked at. Another thing that I think is pretty obvious, but I want to point out, is that we are booking a direct flight. I don't like layovers in general, just because it is just so taxing on the body, on the mind, and just on your spirit, because you have to constantly be mindful and cognizant of the time to make sure that you're not missing your connecting flight, that you're where you're supposed to be. And sometimes the gates aren't near each other, and when you have a minor child as young as Noah, trying to gather him plus gather us and then move to a whole new gate so that they can get it, it's just too much too soon. All right, this is our first time doing this, so definitely looking at which airlines had direct flights to the destination that we will be going to. That's another thing that we definitely considered when booking the international trip, because not all airlines have direct flights, and also to the time of day. We definitely needed to pick a early morning flight so that we can be at our destination early in the day. It's going to be a long day regardless, but to leave like in the evening or afternoon with a small child is not the move. Anybody will tell you that if you're going to do anything with a child or a toddler Noah's age, and he'll be 14 months in a couple of days, the earlier the better. It works best for them. The last thing that we considered was our comfort. Now, if you're looking at comfort, there are only 2 airlines that really, even though people talk crap about them, they really provide the comfortability that we would need and expect, and that's with United and JetBlue. So those would be the only 2 that, as far as I'm concerned personally, because Virgin America don't really operate where we trying to go. Virgin America, by the way, to me is like top of the line when it comes to flights. But as far as like Caribbean destinations, United and JetBlue have the comfortability that we would be looking for when it comes to our flight. So those were the 2 that we've kind of gone back and forth with, and looking at, you know, just how we were going to even go to our destination. With both airlines, they have multiple times that you can fly out, and because we're in the New York area, there are multiple airports that we can leave from. That gives us a wide option. So that's definitely something that we considered when thinking about taking our international trip. So that is today's video, just a preliminary outline of all the things that we considered for this international trip that is going to be happening in a few months. I'm so excited to take you all along with me. We will keep you updated as Noah gets closer to 18 months and the trip gets closer to happening. There'll be a lot more things that we'll have to cover, including what we're actually going to take, and at that time, just testing procedures before going to our country country of choice, which I will be able to let you know the next few videos. So thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. I would love to have you. And what I've done, because I've gone through this process, it was very extensive, and because I'm a very detail-oriented person, I wanted to make it a lot easier for other people who have toddlers under the age of 18 months as well, who were thinking about traveling internationally. I made a travel checklist that you can download. I've added the link in the description box below. It is pretty much any and everything that you need to make sure that you're hitting all the important buckets for you and your family. Now, if you're traveling with multiple children, this will definitely help apply too, because if your youngest child is under 2, everything will apply. Again, this is US based, but I'm sure in other countries you could definitely use this checklist as a quick guide to make sure you're hitting all the important parts of what's going to be important for you and your family traveling out of your country. All right. Again, I will link all that information in the description box below. I have a blog post that will be attached to this as well. You can click the link in the description box for all that information. Make sure to visit the blog loveaprilkc.com for more motherhood and lifestyle advice and tips for you. Until next time, take care. This is April from loveaprilkc.com. Bye.